you teach this, I'm sure, all the time. What are ways that an organization can communicate to its employees that ethics is important, it's paramount?
I'm gonna come out quick with a very academic answer and say that I think it's better that organizations consider that they're never not communicating a particular ethic, right? So you're always communicating an ethic. How are you communicating an ethic or a particular set of ethics most emphatically? Well, it's through an emotional connection with your participants. So whatever reason people are participating. Like I said, I don't know if that's a very academic answer, but it's necessary, right? Because the ethic is always being communicated. And by the time you've communicated an ethic to a particular person or a group of people, they've either identified with you like they want to be a part of you, or they've disidentified with you. So that's how you become acquainted with people. It's through an ethic. Either they identify or they don't, or
So part of that is the emotional connection to your employees?
in this day and age where we have a full myriad of ethical and moral choices, it's through culture. It is, yeah, and culture is always an emotional connection. So it's through emotions.
And TJ and Walter, specifically, how do you go about doing that, instilling that culture and connecting with your employees on doing the right thing?
What I would say, as far as I can speak personally for Lockheed Martin Corporation, is that by assigning ethics as one of the top priorities in setting up your company's visions and your values, it sets the tone in your organization for integrity and everything that your employees do. Lockheed Martin, and it has to come from leadership. It has to come from the top down. It has to come from senior leadership, and it has to be a sincere desire to want our employees to act in an ethical way. And when we talk about effective leadership, we're not just talking about effective leadership, just getting things done. We're talking about getting things done in the right way. And leaders are expected to continually promote the ethical behaviors and make decisions that are going to promote an ethical culture. At Lockheed, we have our values are set out in 3 statements. We do what's right, respect others, and perform with excellence. So that's what our core values are within our company. Now, we also have a code of ethics and business conduct. That's a little longer document that has a lot of different rules and specifics in it. But I like to say is, even if you didn't know anything about our code, you could always fall back on those core values, and you would normally, I would say that you would more than likely come to the right result if you were to go by what those core values were. And those are the things that we get out to our employees. And we do it in a variety of ways when we communicate to our employees. I mean, we do it through websites, we do it through our training with videos, we do it through pamphlets and posters and all kinds of things to get that message out. But the important thing, though, is that we make sure that that message is coming from the top down and coming from our senior leadership.
I would just add to that I think that where companies often go awry is that they're focused on the what, and they reward people for the what, the end product, right? So Lockheed Martin wants to make rockets, and I don't know, I'm the furthest thing from a rocket scientist. So, but you know, in our business, we want to have happy customers, but we want profits, right? At the end of the day, we're in business to make a profit, get returns for our investors. But that's not how our people get rewarded. It's only a small piece of how they get rewarded. And so we're really, and I think, you know, the Wells Fargo example might be a good one, where people were rewarded for maybe signing people up for bank accounts. I don't know all the details of it, but I will tell you, whatever the rewards were, they were misaligned to actually what the business, ultimately an ethical business, would want to do, and that's the how. And I think the how is really very broad, and we really have 4 constituencies in our business. We have the customers, we have our associates, we have our investment partners, and we have the community. And what we focus on is how are we treating those four constituents? And we fundamentally, it's just that we have a value statement and all those things, but at the end of the day, to me, an ethical organization is one that is really living it every single day. It's part of the DNA of the company. We've all been in businesses where you saw some poster on the wall that said, "We love our customers," and then you walked up to the counter and the person treated you really badly. It's like, wow, there's a disconnect, right? To me, that's not an ethical kind of relationship that they're having with their customer, but they may be saying the right thing. So I think that very much it's the how, and if you reward people, recognize people, and rewards don't even come in terms of just dollars. It's recognition, it's rewards, it's how people are treated and how they feel about that place, and we're focused on those four constituents.
Thank you very much. Anyone, this is really for all three, and that would be, what are some examples of ethical lapses that occur in organizations? Kind of an open-ended question.
Well, I can go ahead
Sure.
and take part of this. We all hear about the big cases. I mean, we hear about cases where you have companies that are taking bribes, paying bribes, violating the law and all of those things. But what I want to do is just kind of break it down to what we see on a daily basis. You know, the big cases are things that most of us aren't going to be involved in. And most of our employees aren't involved in that kind of misconduct. But what we see on a daily basis in our ethics office are things that, you know, it comes in a variety of areas where you see that ethics, where people kind of let down their guard, and we have ethical complaints or concerns by our employees. And a lot of those come in, we keep track of those. We keep track when we get any contacts in our ethics office or anyone who complains or has some sort of issue. But the types of things that we see, where we see that people have dropped their guard somewhat, are things like charging practices, where individuals will falsify their time cards. As a government contractor, we have to keep track of what our time is when we're charging back to the government. And if we ever mischarge that time, that is something that is very important to the company. So we see those kinds of things. We see mischarging cases. We see employees who misuse our Lockheed Martin assets. For example, computer assets, where you find people who are surfing the internet for 3 or 4 hours a day and charging the time back to the government. Or they're running a home business from the workstation at work. Those kinds of things are things that we also see. But we also, another area we look at is areas of what we call full spectrum leadership, where we expect our leaders to treat our employees with dignity and respect, and you have leaders who mistreat employees. And those are the types of complaints that we get. And finally, we get cases of things of personal relationships or favoritism, where we have senior leaders who are having inappropriate relationships with subordinates, with customers, showing favoritism towards friends and family. So those are some of the things that we see where people have ethical lapses, but not in the large arena where you see a lot of the bribery and things of that nature.
I think that a lot of ethics are, a lot of people think maybe it's black and white, and I will tell you that it's just the black and white decisions that we make, that someone was stealing, those are easy, that's an easy decision to make. But I think there's where ethics become a lot more complicated is where things aren't quite so obvious. And we had a manager who had gone home and they were drinking at home, right? Nothing wrong with that. Got home from work, had a couple of drinks, and something went wrong at the restaurant. And the restaurant called him at home, and he didn't have the judgment to say, let's see, I've had a few drinks, maybe I shouldn't go back to work. And he ended up doing that and said some things that weren't appropriate, and So at the end of the day, he had a real, very serious lapse in judgment. And ultimately, I think as an employer, this was really a good manager, been with us a long time, made a mistake, didn't do anything illegal, didn't even do anything that was bordering on kind of what I'd consider to be abusive behavior, but he said some things he probably shouldn't have, and he said it probably because he had had a couple drinks. So he probably should have just stayed home, right? But at the end of the day, he was thinking about, hey, they got a problem in the restaurant, I'm the manager, I'm gonna go help fix it, right? So that's a judgment error, and how you deal with that as a company, I think speaks to, balancing this. He's a human being, he made an error in judgment, and I think, there's this scale, right? There's severe errors in judgment, which are grounds for termination, and you start to move down the scale, and how you deal with that is, I think it's one of the most complex things about dealing with ethics within an organization, because one thing you know for certain is every associate in the company that knows about it is watching to see what the company will do. Is the company going to do the right thing? And the company's going to make a judgment, and we might have people that agree with what the company's decision is, and people that disagree. So I think that's one of the complications of ethical lapses that occur inside of business.
And from a theoretical perspective, I mean, if you've ever heard philosophers argue ethics, it's painful. And the reason it's painful is because it makes the assumption that humans have the capacity to be rational all the time, which, I don't know if you've met us or one, but that level of consistency with our thinking is impractical. But we find a way to reimpose it on humans and the bureaucracy because, well, it's not necessarily a human system. It's a system that we humans are existing in. So part of the ethical lapse comes in that humans can't justify their ethical decisions all the time. So how could we do that within a rational system like a business? If that makes sense.
It does, thank you. And Walter, one thing that you addressed is Daniel's Fund Ethics Initiative